Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Oklahoma City Board of Adjustment for January 19th, 2017. If you have with you a cell phone, you might want to turn it down, silent, so it doesn't disrupt the meeting. We'd appreciate that. Do we have any requests for continuance? No requests for continuance? Okay, so I guess we'll go. Oh, by the public, any requests for continuance out there? Anybody else? No? No? Okay. We'll start. Sorry. Feeling kind of goofy today for some reason. I need a motion to receive the minutes of the previous meeting. I have mine here somewhere.
January 5th.
January 5th.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to receive the minutes of the January 5th Board of Adjustment meeting. If you will cast your votes, please. They are received.
Item number 1, case number 14317, request of Dennis Picklesmeyer for a variance to the minimum front yard setback in the R1 Single Family Residential District located at 14709 South Harvey Avenue.
Is the applicant present? Would you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Dennis Picklesheimer, 10925 East Side Drive. I was here a couple of weeks ago for the same thing. We did 2 stem walls in the same cul-de-sac a few days apart. Because they didn't fit right, we altered the floor plan, jostled it about. We thought we had the first one correct, and it was a little less than a foot too close to the street. We duplicated the second one to match the first one because we thought it was correct. So it ended up the same way. And just to let you know, we don't make a habit of this. This is only 2 times in 18 years that we've had to request a variance. So I wanted to let you know we're not doing this on a regular basis.
So there are not others that you're aware of, at least?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you say this is in the same area? This is in the
They're
same...
the same exact cul-de-sac. They're across the street from each other.
So it's another cul-de-sac lot?
Correct.
The other one, yeah.
Yes.
Is there anybody here who wants to be heard on this matter? Members of the board?
I move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve case number 14317. Would you cast your votes, please? It's approved.
All right. Thank you.
Case number 2, or item number 2, case number 14322, request of R&R Homes, LLC, for a variance to the platted 20-foot building line in the R1 Single Family Residential District located at 8605 Southwest 37th Street.
Good afternoon. Kendall Dillon with Craft and Toll, 300 Point Parkway Boulevard, here on behalf of the applicant, R&R Homes. And obviously the intent of this application is to hopefully remedy a situation where my client inadvertently built a house into the front setback, similar to the one before that was on a cul-de-sac. You'll notice this one is on a curve. And obviously when they laid out the stem wall, they just made an error and slid a corner into the front setback. So my client actually is also the developer on the site. I think he owns all the lots around it. You can notice that the garage is actually on the west side of the lot, so there's no interference with sidewalks or any other infrastructure. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and would ask for your approval.
Aerials show just dirt. Is this lot that was built on, is it in line with the other frontage of the other houses? Is it still in line with those?
Well, I'm a little confused by your question, but yeah, since it's on a curve.
Is the setback similar to the other homes?
The setback is similar, yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
So as you're going to be looking down the street, it's not going to...
You don't notice it on that curve, like I say, because actually that house is recessed back some from the other lots on the street, so from the eye, you never noticed it.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this matter? Members of the board?
I move the variance to case number 14322.
Approval? You move approval? Second. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Case number 14322. Would you cast your votes, please?
Thank
It's
you.
approved.
Item number 3, case number 14309, request of EcoSite for a variance to the required separation of telecommunication tower from a residential zoning district in the C3 Community Commercial District located at 6012 MacArthur Park Lane.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive here on behalf of The applicant, also with me, are a host of people, and specifically an RF engineer if the technology of telecommunication towers need to be addressed in terms of capacity and why this tower is necessary. You might remember that this case was originally set on your docket at the last hearing. At the time, the Director of Airports had submitted a letter of objection. We went and met with Mr. Cranenberg, and what he was looking for was a letter of no hazard from the FAA. That letter came in between last meeting and today. Mr. Cranenberg has now withdrawn any said objection that he did have and is now comfortable with our application. So what we seek to do is to vary the requirement that you be at least 125% of the height of the tower away from any district, or excuse me, residential district or use. I can tell you that from any residential use, we are at least 303 feet away to the south and at least 200, if not more, away from the nearest residential use. The inclusion of the word district in the code is to prevent the ability of the tower to go up in an area that might be developed at a later time residentially. If you look at the land that is actually zoned residential but not used residential, you'll see that there is no possibility of that actually developing residentially. Additionally, the church that owns the property subject to this case also owns that, has submitted a letter saying they have no plans to develop it. But if you look at it on the screen where the hand is, on your screen, that's the piece that's actually zoned residentially but owned by the church. It's too narrow to get a street in there and actually develop. So I'm confident saying that it won't ever be developed residentially. Therefore, we believe we've satisfied why we have a variance process for this type of use, and we'd ask for your approval.
What I remember about this case is that the applicant had agreed to limit the applicability of the variance in the event that the property does develop residentially at some point in the future. Are you okay with that?
I'm not sure I understand.
Despite the sense of impossibility that you profess, if the property that is zoned residentially develops residentially, are you okay with the expiration of the variance or the limitation of the variance, removal of the tower?
No. Removal of the tower?
Wouldn't you have to?
Well, I don't think we could do that because the zoning is there. So if they went and pulled if they leveled the church and went and pulled a permit to R1, there'd be nothing to prevent them. They're not seeking a zoning change at that point.
And I don't think this has not been before. I don't think there's been any discussion up to this point on this that I've had. We continued it in advance of the hearing the last time, and so no discussion's been had. But no, we can't agree that it would go away. But I do think if you look at the site and you look at what's south, I fail to see how you could develop it residentially, short of demolishing all the existing structures around. But the provision in the ordinance, we believe, is for the fall radius, and we think we've met that because there's no residential use anywhere within that area.
Madam Chairman, I think there was some discussion at the last meeting is relayed in the minutes regarding one of the items that were before you were limiting to the zoning or no other. I don't remember any discussion regarding
Not on this
them
case.
in this particular
Okay.
case. And this is dealing with the communications tower, and has also federal restrictions in it, subject to zoning applicability of municipalities. And I noticed, for the record, originally we didn't have a determination, and I'm sure that's why you continued it. And since that time, you've secured the FAA determination. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Dated 1/12/2017, which I would like to be part of the record. And there was a withdrawal by the airport director. Is that correct, Mr. Wilson?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So I think it would be appropriate in this particular case, and I don't think we could ask him to limit the other property if it were to be zoned residential. He's got a telecommunication tower built.
Well, I understand what Ms. Powers is referring to, just in the sense that we've had other applications where we've said, look, if the zoning is to be changed, then at that point, this variance is contingent on the zoning remaining the same. In this case, there wouldn't be a change that would alter anything. It's R1 now. So I agree with you. We can't use that here, but I understand what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, my concern is the safety issue. While I recognize that it would be extremely difficult to develop the R1 property that surrounds this site in a residential manner, forever is forever. And, I guess communications towers don't last forever, but the idea that the property might develop up to it and, invade the fall radius doesn't seem to me quite as impossible as perhaps it seems to you. But I may be confused about my recollection of what was agreed, so
I'm never going to say that you were confused, but I don't believe there's been any discussion on this particular case.
okay. So, do I have any other members of the board who want to speak on this matter? Do I have a motion?
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the application.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second to approve case number 14309. Just cast your votes, please.
Thank you.
It is approved.
Item number 4, case number 14318, request of American Motel Investors, Inc. for a variance to the maximum setback of 10 feet from the street right-of-way in the DBD Downtown Design District located at 5 Southwest 5th. And I can say that was approved this morning at the Downtown Business Committee. Approved that.
Would you give us your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Andy Patel with the American Motel Investors, Inc.
And tell us about your application.
We're requesting variance on the corner of 5th and Broadway. No, sorry, 5th and Still Boulevard right now. I think the code requires that we have to have 10 feet of frontage of 5th Street. A building would have to be, we're supposed to have a building within 10 feet of the boundary line, and we request that at this moment we have to have some kind of parking arrangement for the hotel, and eventually we think there will be a more, as the area develops, we think there will be a more structured parking developed. I think there's a chances of having a structured parking available with City of OKC. So if we leave this area open, eventually it'll be a potential site for retail or residential development. So we like to keep that options open if possible.
This was a little bit confusing to me. The address of the property is on 5th, but is this another one of those, JJ, where your frontage is just whatever you're touching? I mean, it doesn't have to do with orientation of the building so the requirement that they are within 10 feet of the right-of-way would apply to every street they touch? I see, okay. Is there anybody else who wishes to be heard on this matter? Members of the board?
I just wanted to bring an address correction to our attention. The staff report, the first paragraph shows the address is 5 Northwest 5th, and I believe it should be, is it Southwest 5th? Is that the correct address? Okay.
The agenda had it correctly identified.
I'll make a motion to approve the application.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 4, case number 14318. Would you cast your votes, please?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
It's approved.
Item number 5, case number 14319, request of Bob Moore for a variance to the number of wall signs allowed in the DTD 1 Downtown Transitional District located at 700 Northwest 5th Street.
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Cosby. I'm with Z Signs, 2101 South Missouri Avenue, Oklahoma City. We are requesting approval for a second sign at the Bob Moore facility. The design district recommends, their code enforces just one, but in this particular case, they've given us a recommendation for approval of the additional signage. The parking on this facility is entirely on the west, but the entrance is on the north. We think there would be some confusion if we didn't have additional identification.
I note that the staff report indicates that the signs, even combined, are under the allowed maximum.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any renderings of the sign? Do we know what it's going to look like? Is it EMD? Is it backlit? Is it?
It is. It's backlit channel letters, and I believe it's detailed there. And I think I also included that. If you need an additional copy, I have that.
Is there anybody else who wishes to be heard on this matter today? Members of the board?
There's no further discussion. I'd make a motion to approve the application.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 5, case number 14319. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item number 6, case number 14320, request of Gardner Architects for a variance to the maximum fence height and fence material for a fence located in the front yard area in the DBD Downtown Business District located at 1000 North Hudson Avenue.
Hello, I'm Zach Woods with Gardner Architects at 401 Northwest 23rd. I'm just here to answer if you have any questions.
I have a couple. Are we really talking about the gate, if you will, that divides your dumpster from the street on?
Yeah, we're talking about the entire fence that's around the dumpster enclosure. So we don't violate any of the DDRC requirements for dumpster enclosures. Where we got into trouble was the requirement of DDRC and front yard fences. And so for this property, they're considering Northwest 9th to be a front yard. Therefore, the dumpster requirement is taller than the allowable front yard fence requirement. So it's really just a design guidelines conflict, not necessarily a beyond anything more than that. So we're within all the guidelines for dumpsters enclosures, but we violate front yard fences since we sit on the property line.
And just for the record, you'd probably be here for the other, if the other instance were true, so you wanted to do the inverse of what you're trying to do today, right?
Yeah, so we basically chose this location to try and be the best neighbor we can be with our property. That there's a gentleman has a property across the alley that we were trying to get as far away from his property as possible, and then also the property on the north, we were trying to get away from them as well. So there's a roof deck that's going on that property to the north. So really, this was our only spot that would allow for parking and getting us farthest away from all of our neighbors.
Well, and it seems, looking at it, like the, perfectly appropriate place for it to be. It's not, it wouldn't be considered anybody's front yard in any kind of normal sense.
Right.
And I assume that your placement of the dumpster was part of a site plan approval from DDRC in the
Yes,
first place.
DDRC
So
approved.
where it is where they want it.
That's correct. They approved it at their last meeting and then recommended approval with you all today.
Is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this matter today?
My name's Mark Weimer, and I have the building at 309 Northwest 9th that he referred to. And I talked to Mr. Woods before, and he said it would be a 7-foot fence, and because there were some issues we had with it, the placement, but he said it would be a 7-foot fence. I know there's a number of dumpsters that go into this. It's a collective group of this area, and so that was my concern about the location initially. That ship has sailed, but I'm all for as tall a fence and as solid a fence as you can put in front of this dumpster. So I would support if it were even taller and if possible. But I understand it's 7 foot and solid.
Mr. Weimer, so are you advocating that you want the higher, you don't want a variance for the lower fence, you want the higher fence around the dumpsters, is that correct?
Correct, because the front door, as you walk down the sidewalk from the parking lot to the building is to the east, and as you walk from the parking lot to the building, the dumpster is just right across a very narrow alley, and so, in fact, the office windows look out that way too. So the higher the fence, the better it is for aesthetics for our piece of property.
Otherwise, anyone from the road can see the dumpsters back in there, is that correct?
Correct, because they are on the, up as far as they can be to the street on 9th, and as close to the building as they can be.
Have you been able to reach any agreement with the other party trying to get a higher fence?
No, at this time, I know there's 3 or 4 dumpsters going in this. It's collective for all the businesses you see up there. It's one site, and in terms of, I don't know how, I think there are 4 cubic yard dumpsters each one, and I think there's 3 or 4 in a grease bin in this enclosure. So I know that it has to be tall enough to hide the dumpsters, so I'm assuming that they will comply with whatever height their fence is, that it will comply with that, and there won't be sight for pedestrians or for cars.
Do we have something that tells us how tall it is? Does it actually say in here somewhere? And I'm just missing it?
It was in our DDRC application that they approved, and we just submitted our site plan since it was a, there you go, they have it right there.
I can't read that. What does it say?
7 foot 0 inches.
And that's the minimum required to conceal the dumpsters effectively?
I think the actual minimum is 6 feet in the DDRC guidelines.
But as a practical matter, with the height of the dumpsters that are going to be in this enclosure, the 7 foot conceals them fully?
Yeah,
Okay.
we wanted to ensure that everything was covered and there was no sight lines.
Anybody
Weimer?
else? I'm sorry.
Mr. Weimer, is the 7 foot adequate?
Well, I don't know the height of the dumpsters. I'm making an assumption that they have made that determination. I actually don't know the height of the dumpsters that they plan to put in there. So,
Well, a 7 foot enclosure would hide an 8 cubic yard dumpster. So it'll certainly hide a 4 cubic yard dumpster.
Come to the microphone, please.
A typical 4-yard dumpster is usually about 4.5 feet tall. So this will really cover even if the lid is left open. You wouldn't even see the top of the lid if they left the trash can open.
The DDRC requires that the fence be as tall as the dumpster or equipment that's at that location. So if they put something in bigger than that, you're going to have to go with a bigger fence or go back to the DDRC.
We can't afford to put a larger dumpster because they're pull-out dumpsters for them to be able to empty them. The largest pull-out dumpster you can do is a 4-yard. So we physically can't put a bigger dumpster in there to make it work.
Having gone by this location this morning in my SUV, so sitting up a little bit from where a car would be or about where somebody would be standing on the sidewalk, it was completely concealed, so.
Yeah, and this parking lot, I believe, is about 30 or 36 inches higher than the road itself. So the top of the enclosure would be about 10 feet above the road surface.
I'll make a motion to approve the application if there's no further discussion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve case number 14320. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Item number 7, case number 14321, request of Steve Roop for a variance to the screening requirement for the mechanical equipment in the DTD2 Downtown Transitional District General, located at 729 Southwest 3rd Street.
Yes, thank you. Brian Timberlake, 7613 North Classen, on behalf of the applicant. This is the Eureka Water Company production facility. We are proposing to erect a water silo that is 75 feet in height. It would be located inside the building but protrude through the roof. Excuse me. It has been determined that the water silo, there you can see a picture, is mechanical equipment, thereby falling under the mechanical screening guideline. As you can see from our application, we have represented that to screen something that's 50 feet in height above the roof line would be more of a aesthetic detractant as well as difficult and cost prohibitive. In addition, there is an existing silo that is approximately 50 feet in height, so 35 feet above the roof line in this current area. Feel like that the silo, in addition to the existing one, is also in line with the other industrial buildings and services in the area, and would request that you grant our variance to not screen the silo. Be happy to answer any additional questions.
So the silo, I think that's a good word for it, that you're going to build is actually larger, just in capacity, than the one that exists there now?
Yes, ma'am.
Is
It's
it bigger
20,000.
around as well as taller?
It's mostly taller. I believe the diameter is slightly larger, but it's a 60,000 gallon tank versus a 40,000 gallon tank.
And it's completely clad, if you will, in I assume metal. There are not exposed girders or beams that are visible from the street.
You are correct. There is a single pipe that you can see that runs down the side of it that's part of the plumbing system of the silo itself, but otherwise, no, it's a single freestanding, self-enclosed clad, it's an aluminum skin on it.
Will you paint it out as you have the one that you have now with a...
Currently, we have proposed just for it to be white. The existing one does have a signage on it, but we do understand that signage is a secondary variant, so that at this point we are not proceeding with until we get it in place and determine if we want to move the sign from one to the other, have signs in both. Until it's in place, we can't answer that, but we're not proposing to do more than what you see at this time.
This photo makes it look as if they will be very close together, is that right?
They're approximately 50 feet apart in on the roof line, so I mean, the direction that photo is taken, yes, I can see where your confusion would be, but in reality, they're 50 feet in distance from each other.
Okay, all right. Is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this matter today? Members of the board?
I would note that DDRC recommended approval at their December meeting. If there's no further discussion, I would move approval of the application.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve case number 14321. Would you cast your votes, please? It's approved.
Thank you very much.
Item number 8, case number 14304, appeal of Hearst Holdings LLC of the decision of the Historic Preservation Commission regarding the denial of HPCA 16-00161 regarding the use of smart trim siding and construction of a garage located at 909 Northwest 19th Street.
Good afternoon. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. The applicant is Steve Hearst, who is also with me here today. This is an appeal from the HP Commission. There were 6 items that were before the HP Commission on this project, 4 of which were approved, 1 of which was denied, 1 of which was a 4-4 vote, in which no decision was able to be reached. As you know, you are now sitting in a de novo appellate tribunal, meaning this is a trial anew. You are now in the same position as the HP was to apply the guidelines to the case that now is before you, meaning no deference is given to the decision. You are, in essence, the HP Commission set here to apply the guidelines. This is a case that, frankly, has a fairly long history, and I would like Mr. Hearst, my client, to come explain why we're here, and then I will go through the finer points of our appeal. But before he does, I do want to go through the packet that you have, just kind of, for the record, show you the exhibits we've got. And I know that they're within the big bound materials you received, but for ease of presentation, I decided to put them in a smaller bound setting. So you've got Exhibit 1, which is the November 2nd, 2016 staff report. Exhibit 2, which is the December 7th staff report. Tab 3 is going to be a product comparison of the Smart Side siding to a Hardy plank fiber cement siding. Tab 4 is a series of pictures that would have been included in the staff report. I'm not sure if they were transmitted to you in color, so I wanted to make sure you had the color images. Finally, number 5 is an email chain from the Neighborhood Design Review Committee to staff, weighing in on one of the items that we're going to discuss. And finally, I do have an additional item that is, in essence, an affidavit from a builder regarding the use of the smart side materials. But before I begin, I would like Mr. Hurst to come address the board and kind of explain who he is and why we're here.
Thank you. Steve Hurst, 3901 Red Deer Crossing, Edmond. And I'm sorry that I have to be here, honestly. I've been a real estate developer in Oklahoma City for 20 years. I've either owned or developed close to $200 million worth of real estate in Oklahoma City, and have always prided myself on doing things by the book, and have done extremely large projects in historical districts, have just finished the Century Center. So I'm quite familiar with the processes. And about 3 years ago, I hired a young man. I was very fortunate in my career to have older businessmen sponsor me, and I wanted to do the same thing. And I sponsored a young man to start a small GC company. We were building some assisted living projects in Tulsa and in Oklahoma City, so he acted as the owner's rep for those. And then he wanted to start a small GC firm, and I agreed to do that. Well, he was responsible for this project and several other projects, and through the course of the months, I'd say, okay, do we have all our permits? Are you okay with the historical preservation folks? Do we have that? Yes, 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 yes. Well, I found out he was stealing money from me. Number one, he's cost me over $300,000, and the day after I ran him out, I got a lawsuit from the city, and it was for the historical preservation on this property. So I immediately contacted the office and sat down with those folks, and they've been wonderfully gracious in trying to help me out. And I think we have common ground on a lot of this. So this is the process that we are. The home is finished. It's gorgeous. I have not been able to sell it for the 4 months that this has been going on because I can't give them a certificate of appropriateness. I've had 2 offers on it. It's a beautiful home. We did a wonderful job on it, and I just appreciate your time and listening to our arguments.
Before you go, do I understand from reading my staff report that the garage was actually built accidentally, I mean, for lack of a better term?
No, it was built intentionally. He built it without a permit.
But literally before you knew it had been done, it was done?
It was done. It was done. And, I mean, the slab had been poured. The siding was on it. So, yes, it was done.
Let me ask you also, I went by and looked at the house today, and I couldn't quite tell from looking at it, even up very close. Is all of the siding that's on the house, whatever this stuff is?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. No, it's not. We patched. Literally, it was falling down because the foundation was failing. And so it was shifting, and as it shifted, it was buckling the windows, buckling the siding. And so we came in and repaired the places that needed to be repaired. And we put the smart trim in those places. And you literally, the problem, one of the problems, or I think the biggest problem that the historical preservation folks had with smart trim before was it did not come in a smooth finish. And just within the last couple of years, they've come out with a smooth finish. And so it looks exactly like wood. You cannot tell, somebody cannot tell, especially from the street or from a sidewalk, but you cannot tell if you walk up to it what is smart trim and what is wood. So I'm glad you asked that.
Okay, my own observation was that there is wood that you can see has some grain to it, There's wood that looks like, it's got about 1,000 coats of paint on it and has never sort of been taken back down to the wood. It's just been painted. It's all sealed and looks very nice, I don't mean that, but the variation in the texture is notable. And then there are planks that are very smooth. So is it the planks that are very smooth that is...
Well, it just depends on, there's planks that are very smooth, that is Smart Trim, but there's also planks that are very smooth that are the original wood as well.
Okay. To ask it the other way around, the Smart Trim is very smooth.
Yes, it's a smooth texture. It doesn't have, a lot of this, which is the same with Hardy Plank, has a texture that was supposed to give it a wood grain that's done at the factory. However, it's kind of unsightly. I really don't like that.
Just don't care for the look of it.
Right.
You didn't happen to bring any of it with you here today, did you?
No, ma'am, I did not.
I'm curious about it, partly because as I was going through my own packet, and I hate to admit this about myself, but I watch a lot of HGTV, and they talk about engineered hardwood floors, and my sense is that they're wood. So when you're reading through regulations and rules that refer to wood, one of the first questions that I had about this application is why engineered wood is not wood. I mean, what that distinction would be. Would you like to offer an opinion about that?
Well, it's my understanding, it's somewhat of a sustainability question, sustainability of forest, some of those things, and this is a 99% wood product.
99% wood?
Yes.
And what's the other one? The resin or whatever it takes to hold it together or?
Correct.
Preserve it or whatever?
Correct.
Okay.
And it's better from a size perspective. It's easier to cut. It's a much better product than Hardy Plank, which is an approved product for historic district because it doesn't, you have to cut Hardy Plank, and when you do cut Hardy Plank, it's a cementitious product, so it has dust, cement dust that goes when you're cutting it. So from a health perspective, it's just a much more manageable product.
What's the engineered part of it? I mean, is it made of compressed sawdust or whatever? I mean, that's the compression. Okay, all right.
And one other thing I did with regard to the garage was we had an original hearing, and there was some general consensus. We'll come back with some information that would support your garage size. So I went and surveyed 800 garages in the Mesta area closest to our home, and I put not only the garage, but our garage has a storage area. That's what put it over the top. So I surveyed the garage sizes plus any outbuildings, which that house had, particular house had. And the average, was that included in the package as well?
We do. We have all that information.
So we're below the average of what other garages are in that area. So we felt like we made an argument to combat that, or to give them the opportunity to approve it.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding the percentages. There was an issue whether it was a maintenance issue.
I'm sorry?
Was there an issue whether it was a maintenance issue because of the percentage that was being replaced on the house?
Well, how this came forth was...
So you don't know what it was, do you? Is that correct?
I estimated replacing the siding. Is that what you're asking, ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah. I estimated what we replaced. And... what's that?
I was just going to say that actually the percentage doesn't come into play when it's replacement with something other than the original fabric.
Oh, there.
The percentages only apply when it's replacement in kind. So if he'd gone back with wood siding, but when it's a new product, it doesn't matter what the percentage is. That's no longer considered to be maintenance because you're introducing new material. I'm Katie Friddle. I'm staff to the commission. Sorry, hiding in the corner.
Thank you. Before you leave us, though, let me ask you, in what sense or what determination, how was it decided, I guess, that this is not wood within the definition of the ordinance?
So from the documents that Mr. Hurst provided, I think the 99 percentile actually refers to that it uses 99% of the lumber. The product itself is not 99% wood. I never found a recipe for the product itself.
I think she's right. I think
So
what she
that's
said, I
like,
think she's right.
we used 100% of the bag of chocolate chips in the cookie dough, not the cookie dough's 100% chocolate chips.
Right.
If that.
Okay.
But it is a lot of wood. The concern with that when it's on a historic building is kind of from two angles. One is the philosophical principle of preserving and reusing historic material and staying as close as possible to what that historic fabric is. The other one is concern when we introduce new materials about the physical, structural compatibility with the historic fabric. Historic wood absorbs water in a certain way. It expands and contracts in a certain way. When you put that up against a new material that has resins in it that is supposed to be water resistant, there's the opportunity for that to do damage to the historic fabric. After the meeting where this was denied, I did call the company and got some more information that they do, in fact, they don't not recommend, so I'm not sure how to word that, they don't encourage or promote mixing it in with wood siding. Usually they're using it on new construction or total siding replacement, but it also doesn't invalidate the warranty, and they don't identify any issues with mixing it in with the wood siding. They wouldn't tell you not to do that.
Well, thank you for that information, but that's not exactly what I asked you. How was it decided that this product is not wood within the definition of the ordinance?
Wood siding is going to be a true piece of lumber that's cut from the trunk of a tree. I mean, it's lumber that you go buy at the lumber yard, and you could take the pieces and put them back together and have...
And that definition is set forth somewhere that I can look up and read for myself and decide?
I don't know that we define wood anywhere as opposed to...
It's not defined as a material. It's referenced in your design guidelines. It's not defined as a material, but what it does do, where that comes from is the word in kind, the use of materials that are in kind, and in kind is defined within the guidelines as the use of the same or similar materials to the original or existing materials. That is the closest definition to saying that a wood-like product would be wood as an in-kind replacement, which is what this requires. There's your definition.
So the same or similar.
It says to use the same or the use of the same or similar materials to the original or existing materials. That's the entire context of the definition.
And let me try to give you a little... Sorry, Mr. Austin, you had a question?
Could I just ask the applicant one question, too? I think I read in my staff report, too. I wanted to make sure this substitute material was used on all the exterior walls in different places.
That's correct.
To fill in where you felt like the original lumber needed to be replaced. I think I read in my staff report, too, that you offered on the front of the house to go ahead and substitute this material that we're discussing.
I offered to go back and rip off what...
And I think it's not without precedent that HP has allowed these alternate materials to be used on other exterior walls, just not the front. Am I correct?
That's correct. In fact, in the same meeting in which Mr. Hurst was denied, they approved this exact material on something other than a front elevation. And it was our hope and belief that his willingness to remove it from the front elevation, maintain it on the rear and side elevations, would get their vote. In fact, I've met with Ms. Friddle in advance of today's hearing because I didn't want to put words in her mouth. I believe she thinks his proposal to maintain the smart side material on the rear and the side, remove it from the front, is reasonable and consistent with the guidelines. But I'd like...
Sure. So at that same hearing, we had an application to apply this same product on a new construction garage. I will say that the guidelines differentiate between new construction and historic buildings. There are materials that are allowed on new construction that are not allowed on a historic structure. That was really the first time the commission had had an applicant come forward and ask for that product and make a case for that product and say, here's all the research we've done and here's why this should be acceptable just as Hardy Plank is acceptable.
And that's tab 3. Sorry to interrupt. Tab 3 in your folder is that study.
So the commission approved that installation on construction of a new garage and then immediately turned around to review Mr. Hurst's case. Some issues were raised about using the product on a historic structure as opposed to a new construction building.
I'm sorry, go.
When, initially the proposal wasn't to remove it from the front facade of the house. That did come up, and Mr. Hurst agreed to do that as part of the discussion. I think had we had that application the month before with all of that data about the product, had we had the additional information that I got after the meeting about installation techniques and whether or not there were concerns with that, I think staff would have likely recommended approval. I can't vouch for what the commission would have done, but I think we would have had a higher comfort level with the product being installed in non-visible locations on the house.
But the two applications that were before the Historic Preservation Commission on the same day, one dealt with a new structure, and the other dealt with an existing structure,
Yes,
which would be
that's
Mr.
correct.
Hurst's case. And there are two different sections of the code that deal with new construction and existing structure.
Yes, that's right.
But the point, I think what Katie's trying to say is, had it even been their proposal to put it on the existing structure, under the guidelines, staff would still recommend approval of what Mr. Hurst seeks.
Is it your interpretation that Hardy Board would be approved on existing historical structures within HP? There are documented cases of this approval. Is that, are you aware of any of those?
I won't speak for what the HP Commission would ever do, but from a
Right,
staff
but are you
perspective,
aware that material has been approved on historic structures? Do you have anything to?
I
Our
defer
staff
to
report
Katie.
indicated that HP had approved that previously, not the front, but the sides of the backs. So I think there probably is precedent.
Yeah, the
For that.
guidelines say that alternative materials, I believe it says, I'm trying to flip to it, may be appropriate in non-visible locations on the historic structure. We don't get a lot of requests for that because usually if people are replacing their siding, they want to do it all with one material. They don't want to mess with piecing in different products. So it's not something that we see frequently. I can't say that it's approved or not approved, but the guidelines do allow for consideration of that.
Mr. Hurst, what was your rationale, just out of curiosity, for leaving some of the historic siding that was intact and filling in as opposed to removing all of it and going back with this?
Excuse me, it wasn't my rationale, it was the young man's who did it. But I think his rationale was, this is a great product. It's a great product, it handles very easily, it has a 50-year warranty, it lasts longer than wood, it looks exactly like wood, so I think those were some of his thought processes.
I have another question regarding the front side of the house with alternate material. Is it totally prohibited, mandatory, or is it discouraged?
The guideline says that installation, this is the one that we referenced that we said if we potentially had already started accepting Smart Side as a comparable alternative to Hardy Plank, this is what we would have looked to for guidance. Installation of fiber cement products may be appropriate for rear or side elevations not readily visible from the public right-of-way in order to replace wood siding that is missing or deteriorated beyond repair. Goes on to talk about districts. If determined appropriate, siding shall be consistent with the size pattern, et cetera. So
It doesn't speak to the front, so you're just making the assumption from the language on the rear, correct?
That is correct. It does not specifically say that it is prohibited on the front. It just says that it may be appropriate in non-visible locations. So we would
Which
interpret
indicates
that
that it
as
would
meaning.
not be appropriate on the front.
Yeah.
Is the assumption.
Before we go any further, is anybody here asking us to send this back to the HP? I mean, your comment that if you'd had this information earlier, you believe that staff would have recommended approval. I think if I remember correctly, and that's what I was consulting with our counsel about, that the question of us remanding things generally has to do with new evidence, and I assume that would mean something that has come up since the hearing. And that's not quite what you're saying, but I mean, is there anybody that wants HP to take another look at this?
No.
Just asking.
I don't think that that's really my role as staff to tell you all what you should do.
I'm not asking you to tell, but I'm asking, I want to know if that's what you're asking for.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
And let me tell you why. I don't know if anyone actually watched the hearings or both of them. there's a provision in the staff report that says the work is to be reviewed as if it hasn't been done. There wasn't a whole lot of discussion except for one committee member. And there was a sense of anger that this had been done. And we're not here to say we did it on purpose, we're looking for forgiveness. What happened has happened. Mr. Hurst has spent a bunch of time, effort, and money to try to remedy this. And I spent probably 10 minutes begging the commission to tell me, if we come back, is this something that you'd find acceptable? Nobody said a word except for one individual who is sitting in Mr. Craven's seat and just said no. And she just kept going back to time and time again. It tells me that I have to review it as the work that hasn't been done, but it was. It was already done. It was done without a permit. And so, luckily, we have a review process such as this. I don't think it would benefit anyone. And here's really why. They gave us a sense that we explained why we believe the garage size was appropriate under the guidelines. And they gave us a sense in the November hearing that if we came back and proved what we were saying with data, that our garage is not big if you look district-wide, that would be viewed favorably, perhaps. And so he spent a considerable amount of time and effort to come up with all the data. And again, he did it on several blocks, 4 streets, and I'll go through it here momentarily. But what he found was exactly what we were saying. Looking at the district, which is what the guidelines say, not this one street, but the district, our garage is not large. In fact, it's not the largest. It's not even, if you did the entire district, which he didn't do, I would venture to guess it's probably right down the middle. But when we showed the data, it was a 4-4 vote. And this is at the December meeting. So we took their cue that if you prove what you're saying, we're not going to guarantee your results. But in fact, we came back and it didn't matter. It was a 4-4 vote. And then one of the members had referenced, well, it would matter to me, he was one of the four no votes, it would matter to me if you could tell me of all the garages surveyed when they were all built. Well, short of being able to find the individual that actually, paid the invoice for the work, there's no way to do that. The county assessor doesn't reference when things were built all the time. And so it was clear that we had no path from this stalemate. And
That's not what you're seeking, and assuming that no members of the board are suggesting that that's what we do, then I suggest we just move on.
I do not, Your Honor. I listened to both of the hearings. They were quite in depth, and there was a whole full hearing, and one action was taken regarding the smart side, and that is a separate. And then the second one was continued on to hear the further information. So the one dealing with the garage was 2 full hearings, very detailed, and with respect to the information, there was presentation of the status of the integrity of the smart side. So I feel we're here to, I don't feel that a remand would be in order.
Anybody else? Okay, let's
If we
move
owe
on.
Mr. Hurst nothing today, we owe him a decision. I mean, that's, we got to move this. Katie, I got a question for you. I'm curious. There's a house at 905, which is immediately adjacent to this house to the east. And that house has a garage in the back. It is slightly smaller than Mr. Hurst's garage. But the siding on that garage, do you know what that material is? And do you know if that is a historic garage or not?
I have no idea.
No idea.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Do you guys happen to know the answer to that?
Well, I believe it to be smart trim.
I think it is too. In fact, I think it's the exact same material, and to the point that if your neighbor asked, I was the one sticking my finger in their siding.
I have not brought that up in 5 months because
But my curious is that, do you know when are we aware when that garage was constructed?
just in the last couple of years.
Okay, so it's a new structure similar to yours. And I'm sure we don't know if there was a certificate of appropriateness that was reviewed for that structure.
I would hope that there was. I think if there wasn't, then that one has gone completely missed for an extended period.
The reason I note that for the board is I think it's important to note that these two structures, you could extend your arms out and touch both of them at the same time if there weren't a fence there. And they look identical. And I say that too because I had to, if you get up and you look at the siding on the home, you can tell. You got to get right up on it and you almost have to know what you're looking at. But you can tell the difference between what is the original wood and what is not. When you get to the sidewalk or the street or across the street, if you can tell, I'm really impressed. They're very, very, very similar in texture, appearance, size. It's not like you see these tattered remains of wood siding, okay? The material itself, when you get up close to it, is in these two garages, I mean, it is identical in nature. And to me, they're the exact same material. I just didn't know if there was knowledge here about whether or not this particular structure, I'm referencing it now through, there's another structure at 823 Northwest 19th that the garage fronts what would not be the collector street, which would be 19th, it would be whatever that is right there. The first street that runs north and south east of this, the subject property. And it appears to have the exact same material as Mr. Hurst's garage. Again, I can't be sure because they're all painted, so you can't be 100% sure, but they look similar. So no information or no knowledge of...
I know we have not, other than the one that was just approved at the same hearing where Mr. Hurst was heard, we have not approved a new garage with SmartSide. We have approved new garages with hardy plank or fiber cement siding, which now that SmartSide has a smooth finish, I imagine have very similar appearances. So it may be that the other garages you saw are a hardy plank product and they just look exactly alike. It may be that they got approved for one thing and used something else and haven't been caught. I haven't gone out and banged on the walls to verify what either of those were. Yeah.
I understand. But the reason I ask is because when the great takeaway from these guidelines and standards is that when you look at them, the spirit of historic preservation is to keep the integrity of the district there and to keep the character there. So if these structures were historic or they had been approved, I mean, when you go out there and you look and you stand in the middle of the street and you kind of look around like a Google car would, you see all these houses that have different types of wood siding and finish, but at least to me, they all look very, very, very similar. So I just wanted to make that's kind of my 2 cents on the material, and I just wanted to know if you had any info that I didn't have there.
I got a question for Katie. When you have a garage with a garage apartment, in terms of the footage, do you count the garage apartment space or just the footprint of the garage as garage square footage?
We count the entire enclosed structure regardless of what the interior space is being used for as a single structure.
Okay. Mr. Hurst, you indicated that
Right. There's guidelines for the footprint of the garage. There are separate guidelines that talk about where a two-story garage is appropriate.
he indicated there was storage in addition to an area for parking cars. Do you count that storage area as part of the total square footage of the garage, or just the area where vehicles are?
We would calculate, if it's part of the entire building, if it's the same foundation, the same structure, we would count that all as one square footage.
Which is kind of one of the, frankly, unique issues here, because as you referenced, you could have a 450 square foot footprint, but you throw a 450 square foot garage, all of a sudden you've got a much more imposing, massive structure than you do when it's single story.
And I did some looking too, the same way that other members did. And a block away in the 900 block on 18th, you've got a 572 square foot garage and a 572 square foot garage apartment. And there's a couple of other instances in the area too. I'm ready to go ahead and stake out my position on this and see if we can be expeditious in our work. I am an advocate for enforcement of the standards and guidelines. I believe that their enforcement and compliance with them is what makes this area desirable, not only as a place to live, but as a business opportunity for you to come in and take an older structure and rehabilitate it and sell it to another family. So I'm always disappointed when we, take exception to compliance, or when we have an area where judgment is exercised, and I feel like, we may be eroding those guidelines. So that's my position, and I, what Katie does and what other people that, advocate for preservation, I am on your side very much. In this case, I think, the square footage of the garage is on the high side. The fact that it's behind the house from the street. It's essentially all concealed. The original construction, the garage more likely would have been offset, probably in this case back to the west, so that, I mean, this was built, early cars, horse and wagon, and it would have been much more likely that you would have driven down the driveway and more likely into the carriage house or the garage. I'm not going to object to what you've done on the garage. And if you are willing to replace the front of the structure and go back with the original wood, I will advocate for what you're here for today. I don't want to cut short any discussion or any other questions, but that's my position on this matter.
Please do.
And just inquire further, there was some discussion about the footprint of the 450. And if you read all of the guidelines, the sustainability guidelines together, it appears to me you go and not only look at that, and I don't read it as mandatory language, I read it as a discretionary guideline, and then I go and look further down to what 4.46, and I further look down to 4.4.8, which is in this particular case, the garage was not there, as you originally at some point in time, prior to 55 or something, was removed. Is that correct? So nobody knows what that footprint was. But it does appear that you can look at other other similar garages in the within the historic district, and that would be the entire district. Is that correct?
Yes, so that 4.4.6 calls out that 450 square feet or 5% of the lot is kind of the baseline for garage size, that even if your historic garage was very tiny, you can automatically go up to that size because we evaluated that to be kind of a functional two-car garage size for the average property. Then the commission is authorized to consider additional factors like the level of visibility and like the size of surrounding garages. That particular guideline just says surrounding structures. It doesn't specify how far surrounding. The commission has generally felt like garages that are closer to the subject house are more applicable than those that are farther away. Houses that are similar to the subject house are more relevant than houses that are not similar in scale and that sort of thing. So that's why they don't just automatically look at, okay, what's the average for the entire district? They try to look at similar properties, that sort of thing. But yes,
And there was a survey that's part of the documentation that showed various sizes up into including the relevant size of this particular case. Is that correct?
Yes. Mr. Hurst, but for the first meeting, staff evaluated kind of the surrounding block, each side of the street, and then the side to the north of the alley. And then at the December meeting, Mr. Hurst provided additional documentation on a larger area.
In response to that comment, Katie, I have to say, one of the things that kind of caught my attention as I was looking at this was the provision at 4.4.8 that specifically says when no photographic or other documentation of a previous garage is available, new garages should be compatible in size, scale, proportion, spacing, texture, setbacks, height, material, color, and detail to the primary building, and should relate to similar garages within the historic district as appropriate. It doesn't limit it to surrounding
Right.
garages.
That one says within the district. The 4.4.6 says surrounding, but that again is not, surrounding is not defined as far as how close.
Considerable discussion was on that, and it was, as you might guess, me advocating for that exact position. And the response that I got back time and time again was, well, that's just not how we do it. I said, well, that may be the policy or how you actually do it, but that's not what your guidelines say. Your guidelines allow a broader search.
I should also note that the staff report indicated a 1922 Sanborn map indicated that the original garage was probably located, toward the northwest corner. It's a 50-foot lot. I looked at the average size of a two-car garage. The minimum would be 20 by 20. More likely would be 22, 23, 24 wide, and then that deep. which would still, begin to encroach on the allowable square footage. But the fact that this new garage, even though I think it's probably larger than what was there, there was another comment in staff report that they felt like the original garage was probably around 500 square foot, which would have been a larger than normal garage because the house is larger than normal. But I think, the orientation of the garage, the fact that it's, you drive into the garage from the alley, the fact that it's not visible from the street is something to take into consideration. And so, for that matter, I think the 690 personally is on the high side, but for me, it's not enough of a factor to object to your request.
Do you have any more comments? For myself, I have to say that if you think that engineered wood is, the end of the world, I think you need to look at definition in a way that makes it clear that it would not be included. Frankly, I'm not sure that this is not wood, so reference to in-kind and similar materials, I'm not sure I would get there on that, so.
Well, I think it's going to be incumbent on them, too, as new materials are introduced into the marketplace, is for them to, keep their guidelines current, and so that they are prepared to address materials.
Yeah. I think if you called SmartSide, they would absolutely tell you it's not wood. They would not sell their product as being the same thing as wood. They would say it's better than wood, probably, actually. But I think chemically, compositionally, it's not the same thing as a.
Well, they've got to differentiate themselves from wood if they're going to charge more for it, right?
Right. Yes. And to Mr. Austin's point, we have materials that are specifically called out as allowed. We have others that are specifically called out as prohibited. And then there are constantly new materials coming on that are not addressed. So when an applicant comes forward and presents information about that product and makes their case for it, the commission considers it, which is why it was approved on the previous application for the new garage.
I watch this old house from time to time, and one of the things that I see there is there's a lot of advocacy in that program for PVC, for trim, exterior trim, because it's more durable than any of this, and so I think there are always new materials being introduced in the marketplace, and I think this it's incumbent upon you all to stay current with what's out there, what's available, because sure as the world, it's just a matter of time before somebody comes and asks you for some of these other materials. Any other discussion? If not, I'm prepared to make a motion to approve.
One question, what about the door, the garage door? Was there an issue on that?
We're willing to remove the garage door and replace it with something that can be approved administratively by staff, so we can make that a part of the motion as well. And on the motion, I think it needs to be to reverse the decision rather than approve.
I just have one comment I want to make so that it's in the record. There were two things in the hearing of the HP Commission that I just want to make note of. Both Katie and George Massey, I'm pretty sure is who it was. When you watch it on the citychannel20.gov, you can't tell who's talking because the screen is a thumbnail. But I'm pretty sure that's who that was, about your efforts to try and get these guidelines and standards in the hands of people as a part of public record when they're purchasing a home. I'd like to please encourage you guys to keep working toward that. I would like to say that I appreciate very much what you do and what they do. Their job is difficult. I think I can sort of sympathize, Mr. Box, with the person who was here in my chair that was very angry because you feel like you're there to uphold these standards and guidelines and protect those districts, and you feel like if you let something like that go, you've created an open door policy, and that's not what they want, and that's not what we want either. But these things are tricky, and the more notice people have that these things exist, the more comfortable I am telling someone that what they've done is not in line with them. And that they should have thought that through, and that they've been on notice since they bought their property. It's not to say, clearly Mr. Hurst is an experienced developer. By his admission, he has historical experience. But to Mr. Austin's point, there's always new things that are changing. We can't expect that you guys are going to be at the forefront of building material and construction changes. But I think making sure that you're honoring these guidelines, not your standards, but your guidelines, as we've talked about before in these cases, is probably what you should relay to them that's of the utmost importance. So,
And I would actually like to reiterate Mr. Austin's earlier comments. I think we all take very seriously the HP requirements and the work that you do and the work that the commission does. And, you know, it's always difficult to be in a position of reversing a decision that they've made. It's not something that we do lightly, and it's not something that's always comfortable to do. But there are those times, so.
And just for the record, the issues regarding the garage, it was a tie vote. So it was handled as a deemed denial, so it was 4-4, correct?
Yes, it was actually a motion to approve, and the motion failed.
Laura, do you concur with Mr. Box's request for how the motion should be structured, that it should be a denial instead of an approval?
Yeah, that would be, since this is an appeal, it would be a reversal of the HP Commission decision.
Then I make a motion to reverse the decision of the HP Commission. The contingencies are the removal and replacement of the garage doors so that they can be administratively approved, the removal of the smart side from the front exposure of the house and replaced with wood that is in compliance with the standard and guideline.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to reverse the decision of the Historic Preservation Commission in case number 14304. Would you cast your votes, please?
Thank you.
Can I say something real quick? I really appreciate that y'all went out and looked at this property. I appreciate that very much, that you went and took the extra effort to take the, I know everybody takes it very seriously, but I appreciate you doing that.
Well, I've got one comment for you too, sir. I appreciate your honesty and your candor. You had a job that went bad, and you didn't try to cover it up or lie your way through this. You said, you know, I had a bad job.
Thank you.
And you've taken responsibility for it, and that means something to me.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for that.
And I hope you take this the right way when I say we hope we never see you here again.
Trust me, I do.
Okay, we are finished with our regular business. Do I have communications and reports from boards or committees? No, I do not. Board members, anybody have anything they want to say? No? Our municipal counselor? Citizens to be heard? Emily Pomeroy, I see you back there. Did you come to speak to us?
We demand that you come say something important.
So then I'll take a motion to adjourn.
It's my job. Make a motion to adjourn.
I have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. Thank you. We're adjourned.